Hey all, this episode features Nicole Banister, TV show host and presenter. In this conversation, we dive into how she pivoted from international development to hosting. We dive into disastrous phone call number 1 and number 2, and moments in which she realized that the organization she was working at just was no longer a good fit. We also talk about frank conversations she's had with her parents around trauma and gaslighting. What does it mean to trust herself and the signs she's been receiving that this is a path that is for her? And so many things in between. This conversation is freaking powerful, dynamic, high energy, and authentic. I see the ways in which Nicole has stood up for herself and spoken out in moments in which she doesn't know how other people are going to respond. And because of that, truly because of her truth and because of her willingness to be brave, she is where she is. This conversation got me reflecting on all the ways in which I can continue to be brave and how fear is often a sign that we are on the right path. And when we can lean into that fear, when we can ask ourselves, what is our biggest fear? And go do that, life changes, magic happens. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ampersand. My name is Jenny, and Ampersand is an amazing podcast about the integration of all parts of yourself and how beautiful life is when you do so. Today, I have a lovely guest on, Nicole Banister, aka Nikki Banz. She is an award-winning TV show host, presenter, and international changemaker. Splitting her time across Los Angeles, California, and Cape Town, South Africa, she's the host of the celebrity interview series Nikki Banz Live every Tuesday, as well as Started Up, the YouTube series showcasing one of the world's most prestigious social entrepreneurship competitions. Nicole has hosted conferences, panels, and events in 25 different countries. And her list of high-profile interviews includes drag queen Manila Luzon, marketing hall famer Bozoma St. John, Miss Universe 2018 Catriona Gray, Grammy Award-winning Sauti Soul singer Chimano, and the Women King actor Siv Ngesi. Nicole is a United Nations Alliance of Civilizations Fellow, a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and a Georgetown University Hoya. No matter where, no matter when, give Nikki Banz the microphone and watch her make magic. Thank you so much for coming on Ampersand today.
Hey, thank you so much, Jenny. It's such an honor to be here and so much fun to be reconnecting with a fellow Georgetown University Hoya. Hoya Saxa, my friend.
Seriously, Hoya Saxa. Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have quite a packed schedule, so I'd love to, first of all, dive in and unpack who is Nicole and, who is Nikki to you?
I love it. I love that question. Okay, so I oftentimes say that my friends call me Nicole and my fans call me Nikki Banz. So that's normally the easiest distinction between the two. Yeah, if you're one of my homies or someone who I work with, then it's definitely Nicole. But people out on the streets or people who meet me at clubs, they will call me Nikki Banz. But honestly, the biggest distinction or the easiest way to kind of distinguish between the two is that Nicole Banister is the one who is speaking at the United Nations. Nicole Banister is the one who's speaking at the State Department, speaking on panels for the Peace Corps. And then Nikki Banz is the one on the microphone at the club telling you to twerk a little bit more and buy some tequila shots at the bar. So that's the easiest distinction between Nicole Banister and Nikki Banz.
I love that so much. And how do you think about tapping into that energy and knowing who is the right form of you to call upon in each moment? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but I'm just curious if you can expand on that.
Absolutely. I really think that at the end of the day, Nicole Banister and Nikki Banz are the same person. So it is really just what side of me I want to be showing in that moment. And in all elements of the things that I do, I try and bring out a little bit of both of those personalities, right? Like, who says you can't be speaking on a panel for the youth role and counterterrorism at the United Nations, and you can't bring out a little Nikki Banz, a little fun, and get the crowd like going and moving, you know, heads of state like swaying to a fun energizer. You know what I mean? Like, you need to bring that energy into everything, you know? And so, like I said, at the end of the day, they're the exact same person, but the energy, the noise level will probably be a little bit different between the two.
Oh, I love that. I love how you're just like comfortable interjecting a little bit of spice, a little bit of Nikki Banz into Nicole, and then Nicole into Nikki Banz. I think it's so kind of fitting for this podcast and like my own journey in terms of understanding who exactly am I and what does it mean to show up as like this more like wholly integrated self, one that's not like bifurcated, one that feels afraid of, you know, just talking about like my personal life in like a work context. I'm curious for you, what is that journey in terms of like that comfort of that intersection of like different personalities and facets of yourself looked like and felt like over the years? You can definitely start wherever feels right for you.
That's such a powerful question, Jenny, because I think for a lot of women, a lot of professional women, it is really hard to find that balance. It is really hard to show up authentically as yourself day in and day out with all parts of you and know that all parts of you will be accepted, because and a lot of times they're not, right? And a lot of times we're in jobs, we're in industries, we're in environments where people won't accept all facets of you, you know? So for me, it was really hard. And I had to kind of just do things that really were who I was and had to just be myself unapologetically and unconditionally and do it more and more often when I felt like I could to really make it a normal practice in my life. And to be completely honest, that has taken me 10 years. Like, that has been a very long and a very hard journey. But there were little things that I would do. Like, for example, I remember one day when I was still working at a nonprofit and working in the international development industry, there was one day where I was like, I really want a new piercing. Okay. I have 13 piercings. I have 13 piercings on my ears. And I was like, I want a new one somewhere else on my body. And I remember I told my supervisor, I got up at the office, I had an hour lunch break. I told her, she was like, oh, what are you going to go like get for lunch? Right. Thinking I'm going to say food. And I was like, I'm going to get a belly button piercing.
That's what you did for lunch. You're like,
literally. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Bye. And I just like walked out and I came back an hour later. I had an hour lunch break. You don't dictate what I do on my lunch break. I can do whatever I want. I came back and she was like, you didn't, did you? And I just like slightly lifted up my blouse and was like, there you go. And like showed her the stomach. And she was like, what even is that? And I was just like, you know what? Like, this is who I am. Like, I can have piercings and tattoos and be loud and fun and crazy and come into the office like straight from the club. If I am performing on my deliverables, if I have met all of my KPIs, then like that is who I am. And you need to accept me for who I am and let me be myself. Because if you let me be myself, I will be the best version of me in the office.
Damn, Nicole, that is inspirational. I'm gonna think about the next time I potentially in the office want to go on a lunch break and like thinking about some piercings in non-traditional places. Like, I love that kind of energy, and I love that you're just like, you know what? This is my time. This is who I am. I'm going to be and practice, right? Being unapologetically me, because it makes me feel good, and when I feel good, I can show up and be the best, you know, professional worker if that's what you want me to do.
100%, Jenny. Just gotta do it, you know? Just do it. And if they don't accept it, you walk out, which is what I did eventually.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, yeah, can you talk a little bit about that, about like that decision to leave international development? Because I know you were also in the Peace Corps, so you've had like international development has played a large role in it, and from my understanding, your early career.
Yeah, 100%. You know, for me, I always wanted to work at the intersection of international travel and social impact. So doing my undergrad at Georgetown, being in the School of Foreign Service was literally perfect for that. There were so many things I could have done, right? I could have gone off to be a diplomat and an ambassador to the United States government. I could have gone to law school and, you know, done international relations work as a lawyer. And those were all the things I think I was really thinking about when I was in my undergrad. So I decided to do the Peace Corps and serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa so that I could have that intersection, you know, be making an impact in the world and doing good in the world and doing it on a global scale, which is something has always been super important to me. I'm mixed race, so I'm half Black American, half Iranian. We grew up in multiple different states in the United States and then also lived in other countries as well. I lived in Singapore for my first 2 years of high school. I spent time living and working in Bolivia. So I've always been someone who's super curious about understanding the world writ large and knowing that there's so much more to the world than just the United States. So that's really what drove me into the international development sector. It was a very easy and smooth transition from the Peace Corps to start working at this big international NGO and to have a career in partnerships where I was based in South Africa as an American, but every single month traveling to a different country. Every single month I was in Nigeria, I was in Botswana, Cameroon, Mozambique, Equatorial Guinea, Ghana. Like I was traveling all over the African continent. It was so incredible, so much fun until it wasn't. And until we sort of lifted the veil and lifted the curtain of who was making the decisions in these organizations, who was making the decisions behind where I was traveling and why I was traveling there, and what my goals were. It was really during COVID in 2020, which I'm sure so many people who have been on your show and so many people had like such big revelations during the pandemic. And I was one of them. I realized that I was very client facing and I was working directly with people of color to have this incredible impact. So everything seemed really great on the outside and on the surface. But when you took that all away, which is what happened during COVID, and I couldn't travel anymore and I couldn't work directly with these incredible partner organizations, I started realizing that the decision makers were all white American men and white European men. And as a woman of color in that space, I could no longer allow myself to be a part of a system, that sort of was having white people make decisions on behalf of Black African people and just sit there and let all that be okay. So I decided to leave the entire sector. I didn't just quit my job at this international nonprofit. I quit the entire international development sector. And I told myself, how can I continue to have an impact on the global scale and work with incredible people all over the world, to change lives and to change people's perspectives. And so I thought, I'm going to be a TV show host. And that's literally what I did, Jenny. Like I literally just changed my headline on LinkedIn to say TV show host. I had no TV show to my name. This was 2 years ago. And I was like, universe, work your magic. Let's see what happens. And here I am 2 seasons deep of a TV show that's been greenlit for season 3 and have my own show on Instagram and hosting conferences in the Philippines and hosting panels online all over the world. And so, yeah, the universe did its thing.
Damn, I have to say, I am so impressed by how you're really able to take this moment of like, frankly, oh shit, this is not what I want. Truly like that moment where you lift the veil, because your story very much parallels mine, in which when I did have a chance to really slow down during COVID and just assess what was going on, I was just like, oh my God, I've just been running. I've been chasing this ideal of what I thought I wanted. But then I think it can be so both humbling, but also powerful when we realize that the path we followed is not necessarily in alignment with who we are now. Not that it wasn't before, right? But to be much more in alignment with like the person you are, who you're, like the true essence of your being. I think it's so powerful that you were able to have like so much faith in yourself, but also like faith in the universe, right? To know that like, hey, the universe is going to catch me when I make this decision to pivot into something new. And I'm curious for you, like, to me, even though we haven't known each other, I mean, I guess we've known each other since 2018 when we were at like a conference in LA, but I'm curious, since you mentioned you very much were like, I'm going to be this like TV show host. I'm going to trust that this is what's meant for me. There must have been signs, right? I'm guessing throughout your life that this was probably something that would be a good fit for you. So can you tell us about some of those like signs and what led you ultimately to be like, this feels good?
Jenny, that is such a badass question. No one has ever asked me that before. So thank you for that. Yeah. I'm obsessed. Okay, there were so many signs. There were all the signs. Okay, there were all the signs. Okay, the easiest sign I can point to is that even though I was working in the international development space and I would travel for these like international development types of conferences and meetings and things with the UN, like I would travel like with that being the subject matter. Yet every single new country that I went to, every single new city that I went to, I just casually happened to meet superstars, like the biggest celebrities of that country.
That's amazing.
It was so casual and it was so random and spontaneous that it like stopped being random and spontaneous because it was like, this cannot be real. So for example, I would go to Zambia for a week, doing a public health workshop with like a bunch of ministers of health and like people like that. And then I would go out at night and meet the biggest rapper in Zambia. Or I was in Papua New Guinea, which is this Pacific island that like no one has ever even been to. And I've been there like 4 or 5 times now at this point. I would go to Papua New Guinea and I would be at this like high level stakeholder meeting with people from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Sport, Ministry of Education. And then like they just happened to invite the national men's rugby team of Papua New Guinea. So here I am with like world rugby champions, and they just happened to be in the same room as me. Or for example, I was in Tanzania at a youth camp. And they're doing like sports programs for young people. And then I happened to bump into Alex Morgan, who is arguably the best female soccer player in the world, who plays for the US women's national team. And she just happens to be at this exact same camp in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, on the exact same day at the exact same time. So I kept bumping into like the most famous athletes, artists, and entertainers, even though I was there for like nonprofit work. And that was like, that was the biggest sign. And it kept happening so frequently that I was like, maybe the universe is trying to tell me I need to be more around celebs.
Oh, girl, I love that so much. And it's one of those things where I feel like not everyone's so tapped into or clued into the fact that like the universe is showing us these signs, because you could have very much, like you and I could very much have gone the rest of our lives being like, oh yeah, it's just coincidence, it's like not a big deal. But for you to actually like slow down and like tune into that, like I hope more people after they listen to this interview actually take time and think about like, is the universe nudging me in a different direction than the one that I'm headed on? But I'm curious too, like, since you said you started seeing all these signs and like you were just like truly in the right place at the right time, how did you start tapping into this energy of like, I'm the kind of person who can interview these people. I'm the kind of person who like I'm not gonna say isn't afraid, but like you notice the fear, but you do it anyways. Like, how do you tap into that courage and know that like, and have that belief that like you are capable of doing this?
It takes so much self-work, especially because, at least for me in my experience, I was in an industry and working at a company that was gaslighting the shit out of me. So they were making me feel like I couldn't talk to these people of certain calibers. Like I wasn't the one who could go represent them at major international conferences. Like my voice was small and didn't matter. That's how I was being made to feel. So it really took me a long time. I would say like now in the middle of 2023, it has taken me a solid 2 years since I left in March 2021 to really be at a point where I feel so confident in what I'm doing. And I will say like the very specific things I did to get me to this point was a lot of self-work. And so I often say that while I was in the international development space, I actually never had any mentors. And I didn't. I never had a professional mentor. I would reach out to people all the time and they wouldn't, sort of have time to mentor me. They wouldn't have the capacity or the bandwidth to do so. And so it was that combined with the fact that I could also never find anyone who I thought really was me. I never saw me in anyone who I was looking up to in that industry. I never saw anyone who could speak on a panel for the UN and then immediately go to a nightclub and pop bottles with models and rappers. I never saw that, And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm trying to find someone who really like embodies me and what I'm trying to do and the life that I live. And I couldn't find anyone like that. And it's so interesting that immediately when I left this space, again, in March 2021, I all of a sudden found what I'm going to call mentors, even though they weren't professional in the sense of they were, peers in my industry who had some years on me and who could guide me. I found mentors in the sense of healers. I found mentors who were energetic alignment specialists. I found mentors who were acupuncturists. I found mentors who were life coaches who all of a sudden were helping me tap into the highest and best version of me that then allowed me to have the confidence and the courage to say, yeah, I can stand in the room with Miss Universe. I can stand in the room with the chief marketing officer of Netflix and have these conversations with them. But it took a lot of personal work diving right into and right through my demons from the professional industry that I was coming from that was so harsh and so bad to me. I had to dive right through those demons to move onto the other side of them. I could no longer move around them, which is what I was trying to do while I was still working my 9 to 5. When I finally quit and gave myself that freedom, I said, no, I need to dive right into these things. And I did. And that's what helped me emerge victorious.
Hell yes. And that is powerful work, and work that like many of us are unwilling to do, or we spend our lives telling ourselves or trying to convince ourselves that we can like skirt around. We can like bypass these, like beat around the bush, but like the best way past is like really to move through them, to accept them, to dive deep. And I feel like, yeah, there's, first of all, got chills when you said that. And I feel like there's just so much similar to my story as well in terms of that spiritual aspect and how like those healers, those people who frankly like have a very different way of like looking at things and are able to help you tap into something bigger than yourself. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about like how that spirituality plays into this like such empowered version of you? And when I think about you too, I think about somebody who like is so confident standing in the eye. Like you have that. That is like your being. And I think I love it. I love it.
Thank you for that. And thank you for bringing this up, because once we as professional women and women of color start to realize that we are so deeply rooted in spirituality, we are so deeply connected to the universe writ large, whether it's animals, whether it's plants, whether it's the mountains and the ocean, like once we acknowledge that we are a part of that ecosystem, we're going to be the best professional versions of ourselves, because we'll then be connected to this thing that is the ultimate connector, which is chi, right? Which is energy, which is the universe. So like some of the specifics for me that have been super helpful, I have a journaling practice that I have maintained with so much frequency in the last 3 years. I started my journaling practice before I left my 9 to 5 job and ventured out onto my own and into the entertainment industry. And I will say that I do not write consistently in my journal, and that's okay. That hasn't been my path. There's some people who wake up every morning and write in their journal, or every night before they go to sleep, they write. That's not for me. I write whenever I feel called to write. And so whether that's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, every day, whatever it is in that moment, I just go with it and go with the flow. So the journaling practice has been so helpful for me to not only have an attitude of gratitude and to like reflect on the things that I'm so thankful for, even in the midst of all the nonsense, right? I am also able to like write down my hopes, my dreams, my manifestations, the things I'm excited about, or the things that are challenging. So journaling practice has been phenomenal. The acupuncturist who I see is so great. And I feel like, some people go to acupuncture for very like physical reasons. I don't go because I have any like physical thing. I'm just like, align my chi, look at me and my body and my process. Like, you tell me, expert healer woman, like you tell me what needs to be happening or what needs to be aligned. So I have a phenomenal acupuncturist here in Cape Town who I trust like unconditionally, who just helps me to like actually be silent and really think about what's important to me. It's the only time when my mind is not like running at 1,000,000 miles an hour is when I see her. So those have been two of like the most consistent practices that have really helped guide me into my sense of self and my purpose, that have then allowed me to like have the creativity and the energy to pursue the TV shows and the panels and the podcasts and all of those things.
I love that. I love, the fact that you have like this journaling practice. And to your point, it's not something you force yourself to do like clockwork. It's something that like you just go with the flow, you follow what feels right. And because it feels right, you know, it's been such a powerful part of you coming home to yourself. And then the acupuncture piece as well. Like I definitely notice moments in which I do go, I definitely feel very much more aligned and quiet and able to actually kind of tap into who I am. So I guess like with those like healing practices and your own sense, especially when you were working at that nonprofit, that like this wasn't really meant for you. Can you walk us through a few moments in which you had these like, I like to call them like breakdowns to breakthroughs, like tough moments that we can either like transmute and turn into gold, or we can frankly like, you know, just, I don't want to say like wallow, but like we can either, you know, understand that this challenge is meant for us and really react to it, respond to it from a place of love and gratitude, or we can, you know, allow it to kind of exacerbate the situation.
Definitely. I call these moments, in my particular case, it was disastrous phone call number 1 and disastrous phone call number 2. So disastrous phone call number 1 happened, I think, in 2016, where I was on a phone call with my team and they had mentioned 2 new hires. And they were so excited for the new hires because one was a woman and one was a man, both of whom were white and both of whom were from the global north. So they were like so excited to announce like their diversity in their hiring process by hiring a woman. And me, as the only person of color on the call, was very quick to be like, this is very interesting that you think that this is a diversity hire, because now I'm sitting here and I still continue to be the only person of color on the team. And you still haven't hired anyone from the global south on a team that exclusively serves the African continent. So make it make sense to me. And so I was very vocal and very public in disastrous phone call number 1. And that led to an up moment for me. It led to a moment of more radical and thoughtful and conscious conversations within this team and within the company. And it was met by leadership with sort of like eye-opening reflections. And so that was really what motivated me and incentivized me to stay there, because I was like, I have a voice, I can say things, and people are going to respond in a way that they don't feel triggered, but they actually want to make a change. So that helped me to stay at the organization. And disastrous phone call number 2 allowed me to leave the organization. So disastrous phone call number 2 was basically when there had been a very overtly racist incident in the office, and this was in 2019 or 2020. I think 2019 or 2020, somewhere there. That had been a very overtly racist incident in the office, where like a white South African contractor, so not even a full-time employee, had screamed and like really berated and belittled our Black South African like cleaning woman in the office who had been on our team for 10 years. And so it was like this really horrific incident. And so it ended up sparking this whole conversation. The all-white team from the global north, the leadership team, called into the South Africa office where all of us were, and you know, and gave a really half-assed, really watered down, like not sort of assuming any sort of responsibility kind of apology that was really not taken well by anyone there. And I stood up on that call to the CEO of the whole company, who was the one sort of telling this story. And I used our company's philosophy. Like we had this like 5-pillared philosophy. I went through each of these 5 pillars and told him how he didn't do each of those things in this phone call. And that's why this phone call was trash and nobody respected him or it. And so, you know, so all the people in the office in South Africa were like, Nicole, you're amazing. You said the things that we could never say. And the whole leadership team, you know, in the United States was like, you're a disruptor and a troublemaker, and how dare you speak to the CEO this way, blah, blah, blah. You know, and I was like, well, I said the thing that everybody wanted to say. So disastrous phone call number 1 in 2016 sort of gave me that momentum to stay and try and make a difference in a space that I knew was toxic. Disastrous phone call number 2 helped me to realize that I couldn't make the change I wanted to make in that space. And for my own sanity and my own health and my own well-being, I had to leave so I could make a change on bigger and better in different platforms that saw me and saw what I was trying to do.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And truly, like, thank you for having the courage to speak up and share the things that, like, a lot of people were probably thinking, but too afraid to say because, I mean, we all have these, like, voices in our head that say, like, we can't say that. Like, we're not in a position to say that. We're not going to be respected. We may be ostracized. We may be, understandably, like, fired or reprimanded for that, for saying those types of things. But truly, I'm in awe of the fact that you were able to, like, truly tap into, like, the different pillars, right? Like, what the company's meant to stand for. Yet they were completely contradicting that. And that's something I definitely think about too, now that I'm in this place where I'm trying to call more financial abundance, potentially considering going back to tech, and just realizing every company has a careers page where they talk about their values, but, like, what does it actually mean? Because I know being on the inside, sometimes it's just something that they put together to make candidates feel good. And I'm not saying that's every company, right? But, like, it sometimes can be very external facing for the public to make the company seem a certain way, but internally, right, it can be so hard at times to practice what you preach. So I'm just glad that you were able to kind of take that step after disastrous call number 2 to realize, like, this is not for you, and you can have a much bigger impact outside of this company, and also be embraced and celebrated for, like, who you are, what you stand for, and how vocal you are. So just kudos to you, seriously.
Thank you. I mean, it's hard. It's so hard to do that because so many people, like you said, are afraid of the consequences, right? And there was basically a time where I had to say, like, I no longer care about the consequences. I'm going to put myself first. And again, talking about the universe and having this deep faith and courage, like, I had to basically say that, like, I'm going to take this crazy leap because I know there will be consequences. I know I'm going to have to quit my job. And at the time, my job was also contingent on me living in South Africa, in this country that I've called home for the past 10 years. I was like, I'm going to lose my visa, my work visa, if I take this leap. Like, there were so many things at stake for me to do it. But I knew that if I took that leap, that the universe would catch me. And that's exactly what happened. But it was hard. It is hard to take that leap. But oftentimes what I like to tell people is that the absolute scariest thing that you could do is exactly the thing that you need to do.
I mean, now you're making me wonder what that absolute scariest thing is for me. So I feel like I might have to, like, tap into that and journal on that later. But for you, was it really just, like, taking that leap of faith, or was there something else?
No, it was absolutely quitting because I had been at that company for so long. I was trying to make the impact that I wanted to make. I was loving living in South Africa. I knew that my visa was dependent, me living here was dependent on that company. And so to say I'm going to quit it all and figure it out with no next step, mind you, not like I had another job lined up. I was like, I'm just going to quit and figure it all out. So it was absolutely the scariest and most terrifying thing for me to do. And I did it. And then it was done. And then I went to Los Angeles and, like, sat on my parents' couch for 3 months. And all I did was, like, cry and watch Law and Order SVU. And then I came back to South Africa. And I was like, okay, get it together. What are you going to do? And that's when I changed my LinkedIn headline to TV shows. And then everything worked out.
Oh, yes. But, like, I want to acknowledge too that, like, for a lot of people, after you make such a big decision, it's so valid to feel sad, to actually give yourself time to grieve. And so I want to, like, really acknowledge that happened, because, like, whenever we step into the unknown, right, and, like, make these massive changes in our lives, like, we're going to need to allow ourselves to pause before we really officially leap into the next thing. So, like, thank you so much for sharing that and being honest.
Of course. My acupuncturist said something so profound to me, like one of the first or second times that I saw her, which was, like, right around the time that I had left my previous employer. She said, "You're heartbroken." And I was immediately thinking about, like, all the lovers in my life. I was like, I'm not heartbroken. I'm not heartbroken over any of these men. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, there's no man in my life who's broken my heart. Da, 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 da. And she was like, no, girl, your job broke your heart. She was like, you thought that was going to be the thing that you would have this huge impact in, and that you had invested years of your life in, and they broke your heart. And of course, I just burst into tears. I was like, oh my God, you're so right, you know? But it's exactly what you're speaking to, Jenny, about grief. Like, I had to grieve the loss of this company that I had loved for so long and invested so much into. I had to grieve that I was losing them and all of the people who were associated with it. And I went out hard. Hey, like, I went out in flames. I published a post on LinkedIn about why I left that company and all about their institutionalized racism that ended up going viral on LinkedIn with 65,000 views and 1,000 comments. Like, I went out in total flame. So I burned all the bridges, and I did it on purpose, because I was like, I'm not the only person experiencing this in the international development world. There's so many people of color who experience the exact same thing that I do. And I'm even privileged in that space because I'm Black American, right? Imagine my Black African counterparts who literally cannot say anything because of the power dynamic at play between the global North and the global South. Totally. So I was like, I have to be the voice of this. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And so I had to grieve all of it, all like my former colleagues, everyone. And not only did I grieve, I had to cut everyone off because I knew that was the only way I could heal. So there's like nearly nobody in my life from the 7-8 years I spent at that place anymore, because I wouldn't have been able to heal if I had kept people from that time in my life.
Yeah. Damn. And I want to comment on a few things that you said. Like, one, I think a lot of people say, don't burn bridges, like never burn bridges. And that's not always true, right? Like, I feel like something I've realized in my own journey is that sometimes it is appropriate. Sometimes we do need to cut people fully off, or experiences or things fully off, so that we can heal, so that we can grow, and then we can actually like call in and like cultivate the connections that are actually nourishing for where we are on our path. And I definitely hear you in terms of how deeply heartbreaking it can be to let those things go and to realize, wow, like everything that I had worked up until then, you know, is no longer in resonance with who I want to be or what feels right. So I'm, truly just proud of you for making that decision and for carving a very different path for you. And I'm wondering too, since you mentioned you spent some time with your parents in LA, what was their response?
I have to say, I have such supportive parents, and I'm so grateful to them that they let me crash on their couch in Santa Monica and drive their car around Santa Monica, right? Like, thank you, Mom and Dad. And we've now turned that into an annual routine, for the record. Now, every year around June, July, August, it's winter in South Africa, so it's summer in the US. I always try and go back. So my parents were so lovely, but we also had to have a lot of hard conversations around trauma, around professional trauma, around what it means to be in the workplace, because it was very quick for my parents to be like, you're a millennial, like, just stick it out, like, just work at the company for 30 years. Like, what do you even know about the workplace? You know, like, my dad was the CEO of an oil company. You know, he was like, what are you doing? Like, you know, go back to work, right? Like, it's not that bad, right? And I had to have like these conversations around like, this is what trauma is. This is what gaslighting is. This is why I can no longer work in a system that purports white supremacy and white saviorism over the lives of African children. Like, I was like, this is the reality of this world that we live in today. And I had to tell my parents, we had some really hard conversations. But I had to be like, I can only do what I'm doing right now because of you. Because you sat there and you stuck it out. Because you dealt with all the bullshit racism and xenophobia, my mom being an Iranian immigrant. I was like, because y'all sat there and y'all stuck all that out, I have the choice to say no. So thank you. And that's been one of the most profound conversations that my parents and I have ever had. And I'm so grateful to them for letting me do what I did and allowing me to do what I did, because they set me up with the clarity of mind and the financial freedom to be able to do that. And that's something that little to no people of color have. But thank God my parents did that for me, and it's allowed me to move into the spaces that I am today.
That's so beautiful. And actually that reminds me of how in a lot of ways, like, I am also grateful for my parents and everything that they did immigrating from China to the US and, they somehow knew to move to a county in Maryland that was known for its really high quality public schools. And then for me to like have gotten good grades and then to go to Georgetown, to go into tech, and then obviously leave tech for my own reasons. But like, truly, I'm so grateful. And I don't think any of us would be where we are, right? Especially women of color, BIPOC folks, like questioning the systems, right? That our parents or people, our ancestors have kind of lived through. So to be in a place where we can recognize that that is no longer for us, that is not something that we want to take part in, is not only because of the actions that we've taken, but also because of the actions that our parents, our ancestors, our grandparents have taken. So I think it's so powerful that you're able to acknowledge that.
And that is literally the privilege of generational wealth. Like the privilege of generational wealth, which is more often than not afforded to white people, is that they can afford to fail. They can afford to say no. They can afford to stop doing something cold turkey and know that like mom and dad are going to help them out, if shit hits the fan. And like we said, like BIPOC people don't have that luxury and have never really had that luxury. But we're sort of in a place now where there are some people, like myself included, who have that privilege, who have that capacity to say, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and not have something lined up next because I know that my parents are going to have my back in case something really bad happens. Like, yes, I have savings. Don't get it twisted. Like, I have my, I had my own savings, right? So that this moment could be made possible. But really, like, thank you to mom and dad who said, sure, it's okay that you just crash on our couch in LA for 3 months while you figure out what's next for you. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, I hear ya. It's really nice for me too that I'm able to live at home and just like know that my parents are gonna expect me to pay rent. Like I'm like very grateful for that opportunity. I feel like it's truly been like a launching pad for me to feel safe enough to explore a different path. So can you actually talk about, what those few months after you left home were like? What was it like to really enter the unknown? Like really like truly face it and walk into it.
Absolutely. It was terrifying. I mean, it's so scary to be like, is this going to work out or not? I don't know. And let's just try it and see what happens. It is really scary, but also on the flip side, it's very exhilarating because now I'm in a space and a position where I can say, I want to do whatever I want to do. Any random creative nudge or idea I have, I can just pursue it. Like, hey, I want to create and print and sell my own postcard line. I'm going to do it. And all of a sudden here I am. All of a sudden here I am selling postcards and have them stocked at a restaurant in Cape Town now. Like what? That's so random. I would have never done that if I was still working my 9 to 5. Or like, oh, I want to start a celebrity interview series on Instagram. Like, let me just do it. I have the time and the space and the capacity to research these people, to interview someone once a week, to call in favors from all of my blue ticked friends. Like, I can do that now. Let me just run with it and see what happens. So being able to have that freedom and that flexibility to explore all these creative outlets that have now landed me into like very serious roles and very exciting opportunities and positions has been such a privilege and such a blessing, not without its fears, not without its hurdles. Like that savings account I mentioned is getting real small. Okay. Like that savings account continues to go down and only goes up in small increments, so like that's a reality, right? But I feel like all the money that I'm spending right now is not like money lost. It is money that I'm investing into myself. And what a privilege to be able to invest unconditionally and wholeheartedly in myself and my dreams and what I think is going to work out and what I ultimately know will work out because it's my destiny.
I love that. I love how you talk about this money that you're spending is truly an investment in you and your future and your faith in this kind of line of work because it calls to you and like you're like so freaking good at it. It seems like you're such a natural to me at least, but I know it takes time, it takes perseverance, it takes like really, to your point, researching the people that you're interviewing and like making sure you are prepared. So I'm also wondering too, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about how your kind of perspective on money has shifted and like what to you, and you don't have to go into numbers, but I'm curious, like, what does it mean to make enough?
That is a phenomenal question. And for me, making enough means that I am able to do the things that I want to do. I feel like I will always have enough for what I need to do, but really I want to have enough to do what I want to do. And what I want to do is travel the world. And what I want to do is have fun, nice dinners with my friends. And what I want to do is get a massage every month, because that too is part of my energetic alignment practice. Okay.
Yes.
What I want to do is spend money on a bunch of candles and Palo Santo. So when I sit down and write my journal, I've like created and cultivated the most beautiful environment. I want to spend my money on plants, so I'm living in an oasis all day, every day. And those are things that I want to do. And so because of that, like, I do have to be thoughtful around my finances. Like sure, postcards was like a fun little entrepreneurial idea, but also the postcards make money. So great, we're gonna have these postcards, and I'm gonna make some money off of my postcard sales. I will do gigs for free, knowing that in the future they will be paid opportunities. Like sure, I'll come on this podcast, or I'll do this panel, or do whatever for free, because it increases my exposure and my credibility as a speaker and as a host. And then when those paying gigs come along, I advocate for myself and I say, I deserve more and I want more, and take the rate you just gave me and actually double it or triple it. And then, then you can hire me. So that's what it's been like for me to be able to have enough. And I think it's really important that everyone looks at what that is for them. Like the reality is that I live in South Africa and I get paid in dollars. So I'm making dollars and I'm spending rand. And that helps a lot. Like I oftentimes have a roommate in my second bedroom to pay half the rent, and that helps a lot. Like when I travel overseas, I'm not staying in bougie hotels. I'm definitely staying in bed right next to my girlfriend, my homegirl, for free. Okay. Because ain't nobody trying to pay $1,000 for accommodation in a different country, right? So I am like very frugal and very thoughtful about how to be able to do the things I want to do within the means right now, before Netflix comes along and gives me a 6-figure check.
Yeah.
Okay. Which Netflix, call me. I'm ready. I'm waiting.
Yeah, I hear you. And I love the things that you're like, yeah, you were talking about how like enough money for you is being able to spend money on the things that bring you joy. And I think that's something I've had to come to terms with. Like I've realized that it's not only okay to have a joyous and like full life, but it's like what we're meant to do here, I think for me, since I was so dedicated to this path of like plant medicine practitioner, I thought it meant that I had to sacrifice everything to go down this path. I thought it meant that I had to invest every single dollar that I had towards continuing education, towards volunteering experiences that would allow me to build up my skills. But like to your point, getting a freaking massage is part of what you want to do, what makes your life full. And like even like recently, like my best friend treated me to a couples massage, and it was like just so freaking fun. And I forgot how amazing it was to just like lie there and just receive that consensual touch, and that touch that just like brings ease to my body, mind, and spirit. So I appreciate you kind of shedding light on that, and that like light, you don't have to sacrifice everything to live a certain life. Like life is meant to be full of moments of like joy and happiness, as well as making space for like that grief, that sadness, and that anger.
I couldn't have said it any better myself, honestly.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess shifting gears a little bit, I know something I've recognized in other people's paths as they kind of continue to do something that's completely different is it seems like, understandably, we're going to hit various obstacles whenever we want to maybe like level up or do something bigger, do something better. Can you walk us through maybe like one or a few of those moments in which you've had to kind of like face your fears and just like really lean into and remind yourself of your own self-worth?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you one moment I can think of in particular. I was consulting for a organization that was doing great work. I was in the role that I wanted. I was speaking and hosting Zoom calls online, working with like incredible young people from all over the United States and the world, and sort of introducing them online to Fortune 500 company executives. So really being able to use my cross-cultural skill set to talk to execs at JP Morgan Chase, but also talk to like 16-year-old high school students from the Bronx, right? So it was this incredible intersection of like all my passions, all my backgrounds, my ability to speak to anyone, no matter sort of who they are. And I'm not a full-time employee for this place, just like a contractor. I sort of started getting like roped into some conversations around like strategic planning and some conversations around like the finances of the organization, the future of the organization, and like change management. And I was like, nope. I was like, this is what I left. I was like, yes, I have this expertise. Yes, I can offer recommendations. Yes, I have a lot of knowledge and background. And yes, I would change a lot of things if I was in that role. But currently, I am not in that role. I am here to do the thing that I want to do, which is speak. And I'm getting paid to speak and nothing else. And so I had to sort of set that boundary to myself and for myself and say, actually, you know what? This is not the thing for me. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to still work for you, but I'm only going to work for you like within this very specific capacity. And so when conversations would come up or people would be like, oh, Nicole, what do you think? I know you'd have some great ideas on this. I'd be like, nope, no comment. Like I'm not going to say anything about this because it's going to take me back into a place that doesn't make me feel comfortable and doesn't make me feel safe. And it's now getting into the type of spaces that I don't want to be in anymore. And so for me, the level up has been acknowledging that a boundary was being crossed and then putting a firm stance on it and be like, I will not let this boundary be crossed. Even though I could add value, I could, but I choose not to because it's going to go past the boundary that I've set for myself in this moment. And if that changes, if that mindset changes for me, then sure, I can dive into your organizational strategy and change management. But if that is not changing anytime soon, so for now, I'm going to stay right here in my lane as a speaker and keep it there.
Yeah, I so hear you in terms of like the importance of setting those boundaries and knowing like, this is my boundary. This is something that I don't want to be crossed. And it's so interesting you talk about how like, you have the experience, you have like, you could if you wanted to, right? I'm sure you could like come in and share like your feedback and really create this like strategy that would kind of drastically improve their change management. But you choose not to because that's a boundary that you've set and no longer is something that feels good to you. So I think that's incredible. And that's just, I think, such a good reminder for other folks too, to think deeply about like what boundaries they'd like to set. What are some questions you like to ask yourself in terms of what types of boundaries feel right for various parts of your life?
I think one of the questions I ask myself often is like, does this bring me joy? And I know Marie Kondo talks about that a lot in terms of like furniture.
Yeah.
But I ask myself that question in terms of everything. Like, does this person bring me joy? Like this friendship, this relationship, like just because I've been friends with this person for 5 years, do they still bring me joy or have we shifted? Does this organization, does this role bring me joy? Am I excited to show up or is there any hesitancy? Does this romantic relationship, does this partnership bring me joy? Do I still want to show up wholly and excitedly to this thing? So that's really the question that I ask myself. Like, does this thing bring me joy? Because things bring me joy even when they're hard. Something can be hard and challenging and difficult, but still bring me joy. Like it's a challenge I'm very excited to pursue, right? And then there's other things that can actually be like quite simple or quite easy and not a big sort of ask from me, but they actually don't bring me joy. So really, like whether or not something brings you joy is something I would recommend everyone goes through and asks themselves about every relationship that they're in, friendship or romantic, every space that they step into, this job, this place. Maybe there's somewhere that they're traveling to. Like, why are you going to that place? Like, are you just going there because people tell you should go there? Or is that place actually going to bring you joy? Should you rather visit somewhere off the beaten path that actually brings you more excitement? So asking myself whether or not something brings me joy is typically a pretty good benchmark for whether or not something is crossing my boundaries or not.
I love that question. Does it bring me joy? And then even in one of the questions you mentioned too, around like hesitancy, I think that's really telling as well. Like when I'm hesitating, I like to ask myself, like, why am I hesitating? You know, and it's really interesting to like follow that line of thinking and see like where it takes me. But I think in terms of that joy, that's something I've been thinking about as well. And like related to joy, it's like, what am I actually curious about? Like, what do I want to learn more about? So I feel like I definitely see that in you. This is something you actually mentioned previously, but you mentioned how you're in this place where you are learning to advocate for yourself, to ask for more money. How do you think about that? How do you think about like advocating for yourself? And I guess, yeah, how do you go about like doing that research and knowing, this is a good amount to ask for?
Such a good question, and really varies for a lot of different people. For me, it's actually kind of complicated because even though I am American from the United States and typically like to use US rates and USD, I work with a lot of clients in other parts of the world. I have clients in the Philippines, I have clients in Singapore, I have clients in the Emirates, and it's not the same pay scale, right? Like that's the reality. So I try to stick true to like the fact that like, yes, as someone who's a host and a presenter, as an MC, like I am American, that is a pull factor for you because of the way that the current world of entertainment is set up. Having an American host means something. And I am aware of that and I acknowledge that. So I try to sort of stick with a rate or with sort of an amount that's going to make me feel, again, happy and like comfortable with what I'm doing, but also keep that in context of potential future opportunities. So if someone says like, I don't have budget for this right now, or I can't meet that rate right now, but there might be opportunity in the future, or would you want to continue to look at this, not just as a once off, but as maybe over the span of once a quarter or once every month for the next year, then absolutely I'm willing to work with people, to shift my rates accordingly. And like I said, there's still a lot of stuff that I will do for free if I think it'll bring me exposure. But mostly with individuals, not really with companies anymore. Let me be honest. If it's with a company like a school, even if it's a nonprofit, I'm like, I worked in nonprofits. I know y'all got money. Pay me. Okay. So really, I look at it more sort of from like the long-term perspective, and we'll try and balance like my rate as an American, but also acknowledge like the country context in which I'm working or where the client is coming from, but also like I need to get paid. So y'all gonna pay me something.
Yeah, I hear you. And I really appreciate that long-term perspective and just taking into account different data points and like to your point, the exchange rate, like what, whether it's like a company versus an individual, whether or not it's going to kind of increase your reach. I think that's so valid. And I'm in this place too where I'm just like, right now my podcast is just a lot of fun. I have like no expectation of like quote unquote getting paid for it just yet, but I just feel like, I don't know, there's probably something there from a long-term standpoint that like is going to bring me abundance in some shape or form, even if it's just in terms of like connecting with people that I enjoy talking to,
Yeah, and abundance is such a beautiful way to look at it because look, my celebrity interview series on Instagram, Nikki Banz Live, which happens every single Tuesday and has been happening for 2 years, is completely self-funded. I make no money off of that show. I have no sponsors. I have no funders. I don't pay myself and I don't pay my guests. And I can say without a doubt that has been one of the single best branding exercises I've ever done. Like every single gig I've gotten since then is a direct result of having this incredible online portfolio of interviewing nearly 100 people from just as many countries over the past 2 years. So even though I'm not getting paid, quote unquote, to do it, once again, it's an investment in myself. It's an investment in the people who say yes to come on my show. And I have gotten paying gigs as a result of doing that thing. So when it comes to a phenomenal opportunity and creative opportunity like Ampersand, you are creating your abundant and rich life by talking to every single guest, by putting it out there into the universe. You are creating that abundance because you never know how this conversation today, September 12th, 2023, could pay out dividends a year from now or 2 years from now. And it not even if, but when it does. So just remember that the creative things that bring you joy, once again, circling back to that, the creative things that bring you joy now can bring you abundance in the future.
Hell yes. Truly like preach. And I love that like you've been able to get these amazing paying gigs. And it doesn't surprise me at all. But I think that's something sometimes people forget. Like for me, I thought I had to, from the get-go, try to monetize everything. But then I also just realized maybe that's not the right way of thinking about things. And I can truly create, like just invest in certain projects because it brings me joy, but also have faith that, to your point, it's going to bring abundance. It's going to bring me paying opportunities down the road. Talking a little bit more about the work that you do, just like hosting and interviewing people, you talk about how you're in a place where, and I definitely see this as well in terms of your energy, but you have this like this comfort, this warmth, this ability to like ask really good questions and make people feel at ease. Like, how do you, I guess for folks that are like maybe interested in exploring what hosting could look like, do you have any like pointers or thoughts on like how do you develop that rapport with, you said, like pretty much anybody?
Yeah, honestly, it takes like a ton of practice and a ton of work. Practice, 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 and be consistent. Put yourself into situations where you're talking to people from countries who you know nothing about. So it forces you to research and learn and understand what are the greetings, what's the socio-political context of that place, what should you be saying, what should you not be saying. Put yourself into situations where you have informational interviews with folks who are peers in your industry or your space so that you can start to ask those questions and figure out, oh, this is how they approach a conversation with a certain person in a certain way. And also don't be afraid to put yourself into situations where you talk to people from radically different walks of life, right? The way that I talk to an award-winning drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race is very different than the way I talk to someone who is the CEO of a consulting company, right? Like, it's very different how I talk to these people, but because I talk to people who have such radically different backgrounds, I am then able to figure out, okay, this is how I change my tone, my energy, and still like maintain my authentic self in the face of speaking to people who are very different. And you can do that like whether you want to be in the entertainment industry or not, because we need to be versatile. We need to be able, no matter who you are, to talk to people from radically different walks of life. That's how we create a more inclusive and tolerant society. So go out and have those conversations with people who inspire you and who come from very different backgrounds and walks of life.
I think that's such helpful feedback. And I think you're so right. Like, it is important to like do that research and understand like not everyone's going to be interested in or respond to certain like phrases or words that you're saying in the same way. And so to kind of understand that context, but then also, to your point, tap into that part of yourself that's like true to who you are, like, and really tap into that like through line between all these different conversations. I think that's such a good point.
Absolutely.
That's so good. I would love to just quickly wrap up this conversation with what's next for you. I'm curious, like, now that you know, celebrate the 2-year anniversary of like Nikki Banz Live, you're in this place where you're just really just like living an amazing life. Like, what does it mean now to, I guess I'm curious, like, what do you feel like your purpose is right now? And what are some of the next steps you're hoping to make to continue to walk that path?
Oh, love it, love it, love it. I would say that my purpose, like at the moment, what I feel like my purpose in life is to shift the power hierarchy in the world back in favor of people of color. And that is a grand task. And I'm trying to do it through social media. I'm trying to do it through mass media. I'm trying to do it through traditional media, but through media and through mass communications, because I think it's the one thing that connects all of us and one thing that reaches us no matter what remote village corner of the world we're in. Someone is watching a TV and someone is listening to a radio. So I'm going to continue to position myself to be a voice in the media that is cross-cultural, that is disruptive, that is unapologetic, but also like very well informed and very diplomatic. And so I'm very excited to continue to see hosting opportunities where I'm speaking on TV shows, on panels, on podcasts, and having more of my own shows where I can dive into some of these topics and build the cross-cultural capital of people across the globe so that we can really understand that we are so much more aligned and alike than media and our governments have historically made us to feel. And it's so funny, I'll tell you this, that like after watching my YouTube show started up, after watching season 1, which is this incredible like social entrepreneurship competition of all these young people from all these different countries all over the world. One of my really good friends like came to me, who she knows me like from my international development life. She was like, so Nicole, you thought you left development? She was like, you did not leave development. You're still doing international development and diplomacy work. You're just doing it in a different way. She was like, you're literally hosting a TV show about youth empowerment for young people from all over the globe. And I was like, absolutely, that's correct. So I still want to make an impact in that space, but do it through a way that's like much more aware, much more relevant, and touching the masses. So that's what's on the horizon for me. And yeah, you want to follow the journey? You can follow me on Instagram at They Call Me Banz.
Oh, hell yes. And I love that it's just like such a big dream, but you, like, I can tell you know it's worth it. Even if like that's not something you can achieve in this lifetime, you're going to work your ass off to get there and get as far as you can. So that is incredible. And I guess a quick follow-up question there, because it is, to your point, it is so fascinating for you to talk about how, like, you're right, like social media is something that people can access almost from anywhere. So I'm curious, like, how do you think about maintaining a healthy relationship for yourself with social media, given the work that you're doing?
Such a good question, and one that like many content creators struggle with, and creators in general. But you know, for me, I don't really necessarily consider myself a content creator. I feel like I use content creation and I use social media to reach my goals. So I am using social media as a tool to reach these audacious, intersectional, international goals, but it's not using me. And I think for a lot of people, like, it is the hustle, it is the grind. It's always posting every day, 3 times a day, and TikTok and LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram and. But for me, I'm like, I sign on to social media, I do my thing, I do my show, and then I sign off. And I'm like, bye. I came here to do the thing, and it's going to bring me the awareness that I need, but it's not the thing. And so that's really how I kind of make that distinction. And I'm so grateful that I have social media as a tool to help me do the things I want to do, but it's not the only tool. It is a means to an end. It's not the end.
That's so freaking true. I love that. It's a means to an end. I feel like, too, what I'm hearing from you is like another means to another tool is like just connecting with people, because you're already doing it. It's just like showing up at places, talking to people and being like, oh, you're a celebrity. Oh, would you like to, like things like that? I feel like those are the conversations you're also having.
Literally, it's exactly that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my show, Nicole. This has been amazing.
This has been fantastic, Jenny. Thank you so much. Ampersand is so lovely and sharing so many different perspectives. Congratulations to you on leaving a toxic workplace and leaving your 9-to-5 and taking that giant leap off of the cliff, and look at the universe catching you with this phenomenal podcast, Ampersand. So you go, girl.
Yeah, so appreciate you, and I can't wait for this to go to air.
Me too. Yay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.